Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@usaprepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set and cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Jason is engineering the broadcast at Genesis Communications Network in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. If you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call. 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line 605-477-3249. Rich Scheben's with us. OffGridMontana.com. Welcome, Rich Scheben.
Well, thank you, Vincent Finelli. How's everything with you this morning? Oh, no. Not the three-letter word. Please, not the three-letter word.
Well, yeah. Rich, I was thinking about that, and we really do need to tell the class this very important information. So the cold is snapping, right? So I'm going to be really quick for this. If you don't have a hydrometer to check your coolant or antifreeze, up north it's called antifreeze, down south it's called coolant. In your radiator for your water-cooled engine, why don't you get a hydrometer? They're about $6. You can get them at the Chinese factory outlet. You can get them on the internet. And these little bulbs you squeeze, and there's a needle pointer, and you fill up that cavity with coolant, and it'll tell you the temperature at which your coolant will freeze. So I'm thinking for most people, minus 35 degrees would be just fine. And that would be a 50-50 mix of full-strength antifreeze and 50% distilled water. So if you haven't done that and you think that maybe your coolant isn't up to par, you ought to do that. And that will prevent your engine from freezing. And typically today, if your engine freezes, the block cracks, well, it's goodbye car because it's so expensive to change an engine. It may not make sense for most vehicles. So I just want to mention that. And one other thing is, you and I talked off the air last night about keeping your battery charged over the winter. What happens, class, is the electrolyte, which is sulfuric acid and water, in your lead-acid battery will freeze at temperatures of 32 degrees and lower Fahrenheit if it's not charged. If your battery is charged, it can go down really, really cold, below minus 30 if you have a fully charged battery. Okay, so all you have to do is, if you have a battery charger and you're not using your car in the winter, charge it once a week. If you have a trickle charger, that's the way to go. Leave it on for a day and then take it off. And then put it on a week later and then take it off. So you leave it on for a day and then you take it off. I don't like the idea of leaving a trickle charger on all winter because it will cause the electrolyte to evaporate. And you could boil over the battery, believe it or not. So be really careful when you do that. So the idea, and if you're going to check your electrolyte, you need to wear safety goggles and gloves and protect yourself because you're dealing with sulfuric acid. It can burn your eyes. It can blind you. And if you get it on your skin, you immediately need to wash it and wash it and wash it and wash it and wash it off. Okay? So those are the thoughts about automobiles. One other quick announcement. I've been invited by John Statmeller to join Steve Elkins. Steve Elkins is going to be sitting in on the National Intel Report on Wednesday from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock in the evenings, Central Time, on republicbroadcasting.org. So Steve Elkins invited me to join him, and I guess we're going to be co-hosts, filling in for John Statmeller. And the broadcast is going to be about preparedness. So it may be a one-of deal. It may be a regularly occurring thing. We don't know. That's 6 to 8 p.m. this Wednesday on Republic Broadcasting. So it will be preparedness only. And if you have questions about what we're talking about on topic, please call in. If you've got a better way of doing it, we're all ears. Other than that, we're not going to be talking about politics. We're just going to be talking about preparedness, what you need to know based on the items in my book, of which there are 94 that I've decided that we can discuss on the air. 94 items that Steve will have his choice to select from when we're on the air on Wednesday. Rich Scheben, what do you have for us today? What's on your
Well, I think
mind?
what we're going to do, folks, is, and before I even get into my rants, I just want to let people know, for those of you who might be new listeners, the three-letter word that I always refer to is car, or multi-letter word vehicle. Because we all know Vincentelli, even though we can't see him on the radio, I can tell you right now his neck swells when he talks about cars. But I do want to add one thing, believe it or not. And one thing you told me last night, too, when you have a car that you don't use much during the winter months, pardon me, especially in cold areas like Montana, to start your engine when it gets above 40 degrees at least once a month, and go in your garage, go to 4. Obviously, your garage door needs to be opened so you don't die, okay, of carbon monoxide. But you also mentioned, Vince, to go forward and reverse just a couple feet for a minimum of 5 minutes to get all the lubricants and oils and things moving around in the engine, as well as the once a week for the trickle charger. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And the idea behind that is when you start your car, if it's really cold, let's say way below 32 degrees, it's freezing out, the oil is really thick, and starting an engine with really thick oil puts a lot of pressure on the seals and everything. So if you can wait till it warms up a little bit, like above freezing, that would be a good thing to do. And then when you start your vehicle, you want to let it warm up, at least to operating temperature, and then a few minutes after that. And the reason I mentioned go forward and put it in forward, go forward some distance, and it could be just a few feet if that's all you can do because of snow, piled up outside your garage. And you want to make sure the exhaust is pointing outward, right? You don't want to asphyxiate. The idea is that you want to run the transmission fluid through the circuits, the forward circuits, the neutral, and the reverse circuits to lubricate the automatic transmission. When you step on the brake, you are then exercising the brake mechanism. You are applying fluid, and you're making sure that your brakes stay lubricated, if you will. We'll use that term, with brake fluid. So you want to make sure you exercise your master cylinder, which is connected to the brake pedal, and then your wheel cylinders and calipers. You want to make sure that they're exercised. And what will happen is most of the surfaces that contain bearings and seals will be lubricated. Now, if you only move forward and backward a few feet, while the differential in the rear or the front differential, if you have four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, won't get much lubrication, but it's better than nothing. So the idea is to keep the seals lubricated and the bearings. Another thing is, if it's not really, really cold, like if it's 40 degrees or higher, you ought to exercise your air conditioning unit once a week if you can in the winter. That will keep the air conditioning seals lubricated because there's oil in the refrigeration circuit of your automobile's air conditioning unit. And if you exercise it once a week, that means just turn on for 30 seconds or so. If you do that, your air conditioning system will probably leak less and will last way longer. But you don't want to run your air conditioning when it's really cold, below freezing. You just don't want to do that. So 40 degrees and above, I would say exercise your air conditioning unit for 30 seconds. And that's whether it's in the garage or whether you're driving. Okay? You can do that, and I recommend that you do it.
Do you recommend the same thing to exercise the heating unit as well?
Sure, because there are valves that open and close. There are bearings that can dry out. So yeah, I would exercise all those things. Yep, okay. Heater, air conditioner, and this is just common sense. Now, on Wednesday, I think I'm going to be talking about the ethanol in the fuel, and that's a real problem, class, because ethanol is hygroscopic. It attracts moisture, and then you end up with moisture in your fuel tank, and then moisture in your fuel system, and then if you have a carburetor, it's just nasty. It corrodes the carburetors. And now, if you talk to companies that make, air-cooled lawn and garden equipment, they'll tell you, oh, yeah, carburetors, you replace them every couple of years. That's normal. It's not normal. It's because of the alcohol in the fuel. So I'll talk more in depth on that on Wednesday on Republic Broadcasting about my recommendations for that. So I just wanted to mention, Rich, even that batteries are so darn expensive. I mean, they really are. You've got a vehicle with batteries, $160, $170, $200. We have the same thing here at the farm. You've got a truck that's got a battery, other vehicles. And if you don't keep them charged in the winter, they can freeze. And when they freeze, they will physically, the lead plates will physically buckle and break and crack. And the battery is not repairable once that happens.
Well, I'm very, very up to date on battery maintenance because obviously, as you know, I live off grid. So I use deep cycle lead acid batteries and not the shallow cycle that we're talking about in vehicles. So I need to make sure every 7 to 8 days, even during the cloudiest, coldest, shortest days of the year, I have to sometimes turn on my AC generator and have the AC go through my inverter charger so it gets banked, the voltage in amps, as DC current in my batteries. So I can't, when you have batteries, you cannot let them go very long without being fully charged. So I am obviously, I just can't believe, to be honest with you, I know I did a dovetail in off-grid living here, but I just can't believe I actually extended the conversation on cars. I can't believe, I think you should write this moment down.
I got a yellow highlighter.
Today, folks, as you know, I've been off the air doing a lot of chores, getting my firewood up, hunting for meat, catching fish, finishing up the garden, preserving foods, and doing all the things that I typically do. And Vince will agree that every fall I pretty much take a few weeks off here and there to do these things. So what I'm going to do today, what we're going to do today, is I'm going to go through a bunch of articles that I just have saved. I'm guessing there's maybe 25, 30 articles on my desktop here. And I've saved them just over the past month here and there. Some articles are related, some aren't, just to show how far we have fallen as a country and how we've entered the Orwellian 1984 Twilight Zone episodes and actually have gone beyond that. And this is going to not, and my purpose for doing this, as you know, for those of you who are regular listeners, is I try to wake people up and show how we've been distracted, dumbed down, and divided by every group, divided by gender, divided by shade of skin pigmentation, sexual orientation, religion, et cetera, and how the powers that be do not give a damn about any one of anybody in those groups. Their job is to divide us. Their job is to basically make us submissive and make us passive and break our will. So we are being afraid to be called a controversial racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobic, intolerant, violent hater, all this anti and ism and ist and phobia stuff on the back of every word, using group identity politics.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. Rich, please continue.
Yeah, well, thank you, Vince. When I'm on speakerphone, it's for some reason it's very difficult to hear the commercials coming up, so I apologize for that. Anyway, folks, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through a bunch of articles that I've just saved over the past month. I'm going to try not to spend too much time on each article because there's so many of them, but it really shows how we have fallen over regarding our country's future and our freedoms and our liberties, how they're descending rapidly like gravity, a rock thrown from a plane. And this is why we need the silent majority to not only read and research, but to have the courage and the guts to ignore political correctness. Because if we don't stand for principle, and I know I'm redundant on this, and this is just a base, there's three criteria that is so important because we're all imperfect sinners. But if we decide to accept a different set of rules, laws, and accountability based on what group we're in, then we will never have synergy. We'll always have infighting. The elite will always be able to foment hate and be professional pot stirrers. Because everybody in the mainstream media, certain professional athletes, actors, celebrities, they're all bought and paid for actors. Look at the wealth behind the so-called Democrat Party. They're not JFK's Democrat Party. They have been hijacked by the elitists, by the globalists, to take away your rights. I mean, they're even going for the ability for the little person to protect themselves in their own home, a.k.a. gun rights. They're going after the ability for the little person to speak up and literally say, no, I don't want this, because they want to take away freedom of speech, and they don't even want your opinion because they want to make you submissive. So I'm going to go through a few articles, and Vince, after I'm done, I'm going to do like a clump at a time. I just like that word, clump. So let's comment after I put in my 2 cents, and let me know what you think. I'm going to start with all this, everything that comes from the powers that be. Everything now. It used to be, 50-50 years ago, and you can see the incrementalism, and now it's pretty close to 99-100%. Everything is either propaganda, lies, false flags, or hoaxes. Everything that comes from the mainstream media. I don't know how anybody is really dumb enough to say, I believe the mainstream media, because they can see it's all acting. It's all making you eliminate common sense and logic so the elites can control and manage the people. So first article here is President Trump and Attorney General William Barr promised to investigate the origins of the Russia hoax. So what do the Democrats do now? Now they're impeaching. I think they should. I think there should be a vote instead of all this talk. And then I think the Senate should basically subpoena everybody from Barack Obama to Clapper to Brennan to Hillary Clinton, the whole works, and let's see where this goes. And let's look at the facts. Let's look at the paper trails. Let's look at the 30,000 emails. Let's look at the bleach bit that destroyed all these so-called emails. From what I hear, they've been found. Uh-oh. Okay, next article. Whistleblower didn't even hear the Trump call, simply heard rumors. Now they're protecting people and their anonymity by just rumors, gossip, second, third, fourth, fifth-hand information. This is beyond, when I was in the Boy Scouts for years, if you pointed the finger at somebody and said that they stole this, or they did this, or they did that, and you didn't have proof, and you didn't name a name, you were toast. It was over. And here at the highest levels, we are allowing this because of political correctness in politics. Folks, it's not a left-right paradigm. It's very little of that and very much more the aristocracy managing and controlling the serfs. Next article. ABC publishes 100% false report, corrects only half of it. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I don't think the Twilight Zone writers could have made this stuff up. And this is regards to the Trump-Ukraine call, which he
Hold that thought. We're going into another commercial break. We'll be right back. Off-Grid Montana. Rich Scheben's with us. Rich, please continue.
Well, thank you, Vince. The next issue is this, what Democrat lawmakers are doing to rush for an impeachment inquiry for President Trump. Basically, what this is coup part 2. That's all it is. There's no evidence. There's no nothing. I mean, can you imagine President Trump, they say he violated the law when he talked to Ukrainian President Zelensky about so-called alleged corruption involving former President Joe Biden. It's unbelievable. Keep in mind, Joe Biden right now isn't even in public office. He's a private citizen, just like you and me. Well, apparently there's a 1999 treaty between the United States and Ukraine, which basically exonerates Trump even if he did anything, because there's a document that, and it's filed. It's the treaty with Ukraine. It's filed in Congress regarding mutual legal assistance in criminal matters. So we've gotten to the point where nothing matters. Every narrative is made up. They start with the conclusion, and then they build so-called alleged evidence through bribery, blackmail, intimidation, threats. It's because everybody has a price, apparently. It's unbelievable. But yet, there's 3 Democrat senators who contacted Ukraine in May of 2018 demanding investigation into Trump. See, this is why we need to have practice what you preach laws, folks, because it's getting to the point where if you have a certain victim group or protectionist group status, depending on whatever group you're in, and that's especially true if you're a Democrat, which is funded by the aristocracy. And the short answer for that is because they don't want the people. That's why they call it populism. That's why they want to degrade us and demonize us and delegitimize us and discredit us, is because they don't want us to have a voice. They see things getting out of control in a very corrupt, manipulated system. They see people waking up, and that's the bottom line. And they need to control the narrative at all costs. And this is why everybody is a controversial racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, conspiracy theorist, intolerant, violent hater with an anti in front of every word, and ism, ist, and phobia on the back of every word. Their desperation is so irrational that we're literally in 5th grade name calling. When you were in 5th grade, remember that, kids? Remember? That's exactly what is happening in America today. Okay, next clump. Oh, by the way, Vince, do you have any comments on those articles that I just mentioned?
Well, I do have a comment about dumbing down, and you mentioned that. And I've got to agree completely that we are being dumbed down. I just have one concrete example. It's just one tiny speck of an example. So if you wanted to buy a dishwasher today, class, you'll find that most dishwashers use a prepackaged type of detergent because the dishwasher manufacturers don't think that you are smart enough to figure out how much dishwashing detergent you need. So, for example, if you have soft water, as we do here at the farm because we installed a water softener, we use probably a quarter the amount of dishwashing detergent in an automatic dishwasher that someone with hard water would use. So I know how much to put in the dishwasher, and I know that if I had a prepackaged amount that one size fits everybody, meaning those with soft water that use 1/4 the amount, those with hard water that use 4 times the amount, why would I want to use an amount that fits everybody when I can use only a quarter of that amount? Well, the manufacturers have decided that we're not smart enough to figure that out. So one size fits all, and you now buy these packets and pellets and just throw it in. Well, I found that it was really getting difficult to buy powdered dishwashing detergent. Sam's Club used to sell it in these buckets. They were 35 pounds, and they used to be less than $10, and now they're getting harder and harder to find. The sizes of the buckets are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. The price keeps going higher and higher per ounce. So I ended up buying a lifetime supply, literally a lifetime supply, because I think that the best dishwasher in the world is Whirlpool, and it'll out old ones. And I have 3 of them, 2 spares just in case, because I think that what's going to happen is I'm going to be forced to use these pellets, and I don't want to use these pellets with all these extra chemicals. I don't want to do it. So I'm not going to do it. So what I'm saying, Rich, even that's just one example of how we are being dumbed down. Just one. So all you have to do is go to Lowe's. It's closing 20 stores this year. Go to Lowe's or Home Depot and look at the appliances and see what you see. See if you find that they are assuming that you're as dumb as a box of rocks. And unfortunately, some people are as dumb as a box of rocks, and we call them the GDP. Back to you.
Well, thank you, Vince. And Vince, I want to thank you, as I do periodically over the years, to allow me to exercise my First Amendment rights. Just think, folks, the so-called Democrats, we shouldn't even call them, never mind Democrats, we shouldn't even call them the left, because they are all bought and paid for. Everybody, look at all the corruption with the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the DOJ, everybody at the highest levels, and maybe not everybody, but it seems like a very large amount of people are all owned, O-W-N-E-D. They're bought and paid for because everybody has a price. So, that being said, I'm going to go back to my rant. Next clump of articles. New York Times removes race context after black girl admits faking hate crime. Next article. Engineering schools are now admitting that they are lowering the bars of standards and expectations to allow women in their schools. Next article. Suspect punches deputy, grabs her gun, and fires at her repeatedly. Now, exceptions to the rule, but majority speaking, generally speaking, and I'm going to say great majority. I define the great majority by 75%. I would say that, and I'm being gracious with this, I would say that 75, and comparing age to age, okay? I would say that probably 75% of women cannot take physically in a fight their peers who are men. I mean, you just look at this whole transgender thing with sports. I know so many women, young women, who have worked hard, whether they be in sports or they be in cheerleading, work so hard to stay fit, to look good, to be strong. And you have all these suboptimal men who identify as women now breaking records and beating women. And I don't think it's fair that that is happening. It's politically incorrect to say that, but when you have people who put in the time and the effort, when hard work, effort, results, and qualifications no longer mean anything, then America's gone, because that's what built America. That's a big part of it. Okay, next article. Marriage rates are falling due to shortage of economically attractive men, study finds. Now, folks, for those of you who are just tuning in, you know, I take some time off in the fall, and I was here last week, and I missed about a month before that because so I saved an article here and there. And it's unbelievable to me how political correctness has gone bat crap crazy. And if this wasn't Vince Finelli's show, and this shows it wasn't on AM or FM, I wouldn't be using the term bat crap. But this is really an insult to Americans, okay? This is why Candace Owens says the war is not against women, it's against men. And we've been saying this for years. And political correctness has been saying otherwise because they need to divide us. Well, just like Representative Omar from Minnesota, you know that one, that congresswoman who married her gay brother for immigration fraud? You know, she's the one who said that Latinos can't compete in a merit-based system. You know what I'm talking about, right? Well, the reason why there's a shortage of economically attractive or viable men, as is put in the article, and I'm just going to use my background here. Back in the late 70s, my dream was to come out to the Northern Rockies, so I was going to get a 20-year stint and come out with a retirement pension from the fire department of New York City. Well, that was the year, if you were a white male, unless you had like veterans credits, you basically stood very little chance on making it. And I wasn't a good tester on paper, but I was physically fit. I was bench pressing 365 pounds at 19 years old. I could run up any mountain. I could carry a 100-pound pack. I can carry people up and down ladders. The qualifications to be a firefighter. Well, that was the year that the women's group sued because they could not pass the test. Let me repeat that. Women's groups sued because they couldn't pass the test to become a firefighter. Look it up. If Google and Microsoft and all these groups, Facebook hasn't deleted this information. So what they did, what did they sue for? They sued because they couldn't pass the test. So they sued to lower the bars of standards and expectations. So all those economic viable men didn't get the job. Next, my next plan B to get to the Northern Rockies was to get a job with the National Forest Service. So I got a degree in upstate New York in the Adirondacks. I went to an interview. The interviewer, who was an employee, who was a white male, an older guy, I remember he had gray hair, he said, "You're basically there for show. I cannot hire you as a white male." They hired two girls sitting in the waiting room with no experience and no education. So to all those women who can't find economic viable men, it's because they are not picked for the job, because of group identity politics. Now, when I worked for the pharmaceutical industry, was my plan like G. I did a 20-year stint there. I was diagnosed with spinal stenosis and nerve damage. So I tried to go part-time with GlaxoSmithKline. The same CEO right now who's on the board of Microsoft. You know that company. Anyway, not him, but GlaxoSmithKline told me when I asked for a part-time job share, which they were given to hundreds of people around the country, for all women. They told me that part-time job shares were for women only. Well, I tried to contact 30 different attorneys. I consulted with 30 different attorneys. One attorney took the job, and then shortly, I don't know if he got intimidated by GlaxoWelcome, or threatened by GlaxoWelcome, or bribed by GlaxoSmithKline. GlaxoWelcome was the merger prior to that. GlaxoSmithKline. I apologize. So anyway, he dropped the case. I had attorneys tell me that if you were a woman, the same thing happened to you, you would have a $10 million settlement by the end of the day. I had attorneys tell me that as a poor, middle-class, white male, heterosexual with a Christian name, that I had no group.
Rich Scheben's with us, Off-Grid Montana, and you can find his book on the internet, Amazon, One New York Man's Journey to Off-Grid Living in Montana. Rich, please continue.
Well, thank you, Vince. And I'll tell you something, folks. I don't even promote my book anymore because my book is I've had books returned to me where the comment section, the context has been, the words have been changed, switched around. The table of contents have been eliminated. The introductory chapter and the first chapter has been eliminated. Just things moved around. We are in a book burning era in America today. And going back to what I was saying before the break, I want you to think about how I couldn't even, after consulting 30 attorneys, no one would take the case because I was a poor/middle-class white male heterosexual with a Christian name with no group self-pity points. And this is just some of the articles that are published in the public domain about GlaxoSmithKline. GlaxoSmithKline has just been fined a whopping $3 billion for bribing doctors, lying to the FDA, and faking clinical trial data and fraudulent marketing. I'm just having a hard time reading this small print. U.S. media blackout. Italian courts rules vaccine cause autism. It was a GlaxoSmithKline product. Pharmaceutical giant GlaxoSmithKline accidentally released 45 liters of concentrated live polio virus in the environment. This isn't me. These are published articles in the public domain. So if the powers that be want to kill us, want to do anything possible, and disobey the rule of law, they can do it. And we have no rights, we have no protection, and we have no restitution under the rule of law. And just a little sidebar here. When Congress keeps inviting Candace Owens or Farmer or whatever her married name is, I think you should stop doing this, Congress, because every time you invite her, she eats your lunch. Okay. Next clump of articles. Oh, Vince, do you have any comment about I personally think economically and socially the worst issue in America is when you lower the bars of standards and expectations for a group under the guise of equality, fairness, diversity, tolerance, prosperity, and none of it happens. What you're basically doing is insulting the work ethic, ability, and intelligence of all these people and saying that you can't compete. Your work is suboptimal. This is degrading. This is disrespectful. And you never empower a group or a nation by lowering the bars of standards and expectations. All you're doing is rewarding mediocrity and turning and destroying America and turning it into the law of diminishing returns and eliminating knowledge, ingenuity, productivity, innovation, and opportunity from the masses. Vince, what is your comment on that?
Back in the 1950s and the 1960s, we used to talk about products that were made in Japan as, well, it's made in Japan. Made in Japan back then meant junk, meant substandard, not even suboptimal. I mean, really poor quality in every respect. And we didn't think much of the Japanese. We had a low opinion of them because of the substandard products that they made. Now, I'm not talking about race here. I'm just talking about the products that they made we didn't think much of. So we didn't think much of the entire country because of the lousy products they made. Well, that's not true anymore because we sent some of our professors from a university in the United States to go over there and teach them about quality and quality circles. Well, you mentioned lowering the standards for women in engineering school. So the question is, do you want a substandard engineer designing your hip replacement, hypodermic needles, automotive steering systems, multi-story apartment buildings, elevators? How about a bridge? So in that line of thinking, I decided I wanted to test out what it's like to get a job today. What do you have to do? And one of the largest employers in the country is the Chinese factory outlet. So I called a superstore, or a supercenter as they call them, Chinese factory outlet supercenter. And I got the gal at the control tower, the operator, if you want to call her that. And I asked her about, what do I need to do to apply for a job? And she said, well, you need to go online and apply, or you need to come into the store and apply at the kiosk. And I said, I don't want to do that. I'd like to talk to a person. She said, well, you can't talk to a person until you apply online. And I said, well, I can do any job that you have. Any job at all. I can fix your microwave communication system. I can fix your computer network. I can be a customer service person, a cashier, automotive parts salesperson, a store accountant, a store manager, a clerk, an assistant manager, an automotive mechanic. I can do every job that you have. And you don't have to look at anybody else. I'm ready to go. I'm your next employee. I'm qualified to do anything that you've got. She said, well, you have to apply online. I said, I'd like to talk to the store manager. Save him or her a lot of time. Can't do it. So that's where we are. You will be pre-screened by a computer before you can talk to a person at Walmart. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Just a quick announcement. This Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m., I've been invited to be a guest co-host for John Statmiller on the National Intel Report. We'll be talking about, Steve Elkins and I will be talking about USA Prepares, meaning preparedness on all levels. And I'll be talking about some of the tips that I've written in my book, the way I do things. You cannot buy the book. I'm not trying to sell a book. It's not available for publication. I've written it for my family's purposes so that there's a record of the way we do things. And I just wanted to mention that when I talked to the gal at the control tower at the local Walmart Supercenter, she told me that what I should do is, click on the area of interest. So whatever I'm interested in, whatever kind of job I'm interested in at Walmart, just click on that, and that would help identify whether they should consider me for that particular area of the store. And I said, well, I'm interested in all the areas, and I can do all the jobs. And it sounds braggadocious, but actually I think I can, because of the bruises I have and the experience I have. I've done a lot of different things in my life, so I think I could do every job in Walmart. And even at the technical level in the computer area. So she said, well, just check them all. I said, do you really think do you actually believe me? And she said, yeah, I believe you. I think you could. So, but I can't get an interview. And an interesting thing at the top of the hour news that we just heard, class, was that people are getting fired because they are changing their genders. And they don't think that's right. I got to tell you, if I hired a guy to be a salesperson for men's suits, or I hired a guy to work in the lumber department, or if I hired a guy to work in any position, or I hired a gal, I would identify that person's gender with that job. And a lot of people do. And I'd be pretty frosted if I hired a guy who then started showing up in a dress and high heels. I would. And I'd be pretty frosted if a guy I hired showed up in blue hair or pink hair, or started wearing feminine jewelry and lipstick. I'd be pretty frosted, and I'd can their butts immediately. And I'd let the courts sort it out. And if they said, no, you have to hire this person, I'd say, well, I can't. We just went out of business like 3 seconds ago. That's how I would handle it. I would not let an employee trash my business because they can't decide today or tomorrow or the next couple of minutes what gender they are. This is nuts. Absolutely nuts. I mean, think about going to your medical doctor and finding out that he is now a she, with the next doctor visit. Or your surgeon is now, used to be a he, now identifies as a she. I'm not up for
Vince,
this.
I have an article right here I was going to go to later in the show. Hundreds of young trans people seeking help to return to original sex. So basically, a lot of these people have been played, conned, duped in order to divide the people, and they've turned into cannon fodder. They're collateral damage. They will never get their bodies back, especially after taking those hormones and steroids. They will never get their bodies back, and they will forever be in despair. It's very sad that, and this is why I talked about the court system. There's no recourse. There's nobody to call. Everything now depends on what group you're in for protection, rights, and restitution under the rule of law. Vince, we're running out of time. Would you mind if I continued?
Oh, please do. I'm just sitting back, listening intently.
Buddy. Thank you so much. And I know my job is to be politically incorrect and uncover the truth here, folks, and that's exactly what I'm doing. Because we've gotten to the point where as long as we listen to the Democrat Party, who's really the globalist elite party bought and paid for, we're going to continue to have division. I mean, Hillary Clinton said black men are super predators. Barack Obama doubled black unemployment. Look at all the insults to women out there because of what is happening. I mean, we now have, these are articles, published articles in the public domain. Wall Street and other companies and industries saying to avoid women at all costs, no more dinners with female colleagues because of the Kavanaugh effect. The highest court in the land, he was said to be a gang rapist, and all these women who came forward, the great majority of them are now saying that they lied, and they should be in prison, and nothing happens to them. There's no consequences. They're saying the executives that these companies and industries are now saying don't sit next to them on flights. Don't make sure you book hotel rooms on different floors. Avoid one-on-one meetings. Is that something to be proud of? No. It's because the silent majority, you got the Candace Owens of the world speaking up, You have an independent journalist like Rachel Tripp saying the goal is to elect Democrats, that basically women have been patsies for the big government swamp. They're being used and disrespected. These are words from her article. We are allowing this to happen because the silent majority is being afraid of being called a controversial, racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe with an anti in front of every word, ism, ist, and phobia on the back of every word. This is BS. We have millions of combat soldiers plus who gave their lives for this country on our freedoms and liberties, including wars like Vietnam that was conducted through false flags, the Bay of Tonkin. Can you imagine being shot and laying in the dirt and oh, you're going to die? And you ask yourself this question, why did I do this? Did I do this for a reputable, legitimate country who's backing me? I want you to ask yourself that question. Because civil rights policies, folks, I don't care if you're transgender, I don't care if you're female, I don't care what skin pigmentation or what gender you identify as or who or what you have sex with. Civil rights policies were designed to ensure that Americans could be judged on individual merit. You know, Ilhan Omar saying that Latinos can't compete in a merit-based system. It's amazing that there's going to be Latinos voting Democrat in November. Amazing to me after that comment. Can't believe it. So anyway, they're dividing us by race, by gender, by sexual orientation, by religion, by everything. Civil rights were designed to be inherently individual rights, defined as the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now these rights are not held equally under the rule of law. Everything depends on what group you're in, what victim group status or protectionist group status you have. We have no synergy by design because this is a design collapse by the elite to hold the narratives. Amendments to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights guarantee that no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. These idiots want to get rid of due process. Nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. But groups of people are using special privilege through corporate structure, through government entitlements. Life, liberty, property, and due process are being erased for the majority of the Americans. So when you see somebody or hear somebody who's basically doesn't read and research, and they say, oh, you hate blacks, oh, you hate Latinos, oh, you hate women, oh, you hate trans people, oh, you hate people who have sex with whatever. No. If you do the job, standards and expectations, Vince, you can verify that. I use that term often. Everything is designed against the people. And we're going broke. I mean, look at this repo thing. The banks are going broke. Basically, this repo rate is to balance their books with an overnight rate. And it's not just liquidity issues. It's solvency issues. You got to ask yourself, how can a bank go broke with fractional reserve lending? You only need $10 on hand to lend out $100. If we did that as individuals and people came to us, we'd be gazillionaires. And yet QE1 bailed out the banks and QE2 and 3 bailed out Wall Street, generally speaking. I mean, can you imagine a 10-to-1 ratio for lending, and all you need is the 1 part to lend out the 10 part? And yet these banks, they resell property over time. I've seen issues where banks flip properties and pay off inspectors to say the house was good. Everything is against the middle class. Everything is, why is the silver ratio 88-to-1 when it should be 16-to-1? Because everything is made to make the little guy poor. 50% of Americans can't even come up with $500. Come on, folks. Can't you see we're all being used? We are allowing the elite to poison us against ourselves? All right. I'm going to be done with this rant. I'm going to go back to some more articles here. Next article, Antifa filing false reports on Trump supporting parents to Child Protective Services. Let me read that again. Antifa filing false reports on Trump-supporting parents to Child Protective Services. So if you don't buy from the company store and walk the company line, you're going to have Antifa, which is labeled a terrorist group, reporting you and your kids to Child Protective Services. Who knows? For pedophilia? Who knows? Next article. Previously deported illegal alien pleads guilty to brutally murdering 10-year-old girl. All these lawyers, all these judges who are involved in these cases, their wealth, 100% of it, should be confiscated and given to the victims' families. Next article. Beto kills free speech, or free press, pardon me. Ejects Breitbart News article reporter from the event. He did nothing wrong. And yet he had a quote in the past, the press is not the enemy of the people, but the defense against tyranny. He is the offense for tyranny because he's bought and paid for from a billionaire family. Next article. Judge rules Idaho must pay for gender surgery for convicted child rapist. You can't make this crap up. Next article. 30-year rate under 2%. Dollar rise bad omen. Rich stop spending. Buffett hoards cash. We bailed Buffett's ass out. It's truly unbelievable. Next article. Trump aide and Oval Office gatekeeper fired for leaking. President Trump, can you find frickin' patriots, please? Instead of people who are willing to be bought and paid for in your cabinet and in the people you hire, please, can you do that? Nothing against President Trump, but my God. Next article. MSM ignores mass shooting at football game because the shooter is black.
We're going into a break. Rich Scheben's on a rant. A great rant. I'm sitting back and enjoying it. We'll be back right after these few commercial announcements. OffGridMontana.com. Rich Scheben's with us. Rich, please continue.
Well, thank you, Vince, and thank you again for allowing me to exercise my First Amendment rights. And what I'm doing here, folks, I was out and about. I was in the bush hunting and just, gathering firewood. And I do this every fall. I take time off. So what I did was when I did get to my computer, I just put a few articles on my desktop just over the past month. And I could have picked thousands of articles, but I didn't because we don't have the time. And I'm not going to go through all the ones I thought I was going to go through because there's no time. But I'm going to do as many as I can to show you the Twilight Zone 1984 life that we are living in America. Okay, next article. Wrong again, 15 years of failed eco-apocalyptic predictions. Basically what this article is, it shows, global warming, global cooling, the polar bears will be dead by 1999, Florida will be underwater by 1995, and by all the big people, from warming to flooding to this to that, they're all wrong because they're all paid for, and government departments like NOAA has gag orders. So basically, we're hiring people to do nothing because we're just paying them to basically hold the narrative. Next article, 500 scientists write to the UN there is no climate emergency. But did that get mainstream media support? No. Major university finds fire did not bring down the Tower 7 on the 911. Have you heard this on CBS, NBC, ABC, CNN, MSNBC? No. There was over 3,000 engineers, firefighters, contractors, 3,000 that was part of this, that said Tower 7 was not brought down. Everything is fake, is phony, is propaganda, lies, hoaxes, false flags, everything. Next article. 52,000 Chinese gun parts seized at California seaport. Folks, these are just articles over the past month that I pulled out of. These are published articles in the mainstream, not in the mainstream media because they're all bought and paid for, but these are published articles in the public domain. Think about this. Why is there 52,000 Chinese gun parts seized at a California seaport? And by the way, they own Long Beach. Why? What's going on? Isn't that like a little red flag to everybody? Why is all our corporations and even our sports teams conceding to what China says? Somebody wrote a little blurb the other day about Chinese censorship, and they got demonized. I think it was in the NBA. Should we just roll over, folks? Give up our freedoms and liberty and ignore the million-plus combat soldiers who gave their life for our freedoms and liberty? Is that what you want to do? Do you want to keep lowering the bars of standards and expectations for a frickin' job based on what group you're in? Is that how you want to leave America? Next article. A climate alarmist sued a skeptic for defamation and lost. A little good news there. Muslim mechanic charged with sabotaging U.S. aircraft with 150 passengers. I'm not making these articles up, folks. These are all published articles in the public domain. 2,246 unborn children found in an abortionist home. I think everybody in the country knows that baby parts are sold to the highest bidder. 53 Americans died in mass shootings in August, and 40,000 died from obesity. Let me repeat that. 53 Americans died in mass shootings in August, and yet 40,000 people died from obesity. I don't see the powers that be trying to ban and take our forks and spoons. Next article. Ukraine anti-corruption director bragged about helping Hillary Clinton in 2016 leaked audio. You can't make this stuff up. Everything they're saying that Trump and the Patriots are doing, they've done. Everything. I don't think there's an exception to that rule. Next article. More evidence emerges Elizabeth Warren lied about being fired for pregnancy. Oh, that's hard to believe. She got a job with a major university for saying she was American Indian. Hello? We're living in Stupidville,
Vince. We'll be right back with Rich Scheben. I just have one question of clarification when we come back. Rich Scheben's with us. Rich, I had a question for you. You were talking about mainstream media, and you used the term CBS. And I was just wondering, I was thinking about CBS. Is that the letter C, the letter B, and the letter S, or is that spelled S-E-E, then the next letter B, and then the next letter S, like C, B-S? Which was that?
It was in the context of mainstream media, with NBC, with ABC, with CNN, with MSNBC, all the propaganda tools that are basically bought and paid for to sway public opinion. Was I clear on that answer?
Yeah, you were, but I was just kidding, thinking that CBS is like seeing BS. That's what I meant.
Yes, very, I understand.
Okay. Oh, by the way.
It was very apropos, I get it, but.
Yeah, by the way, I just want you to know, I was looking at our ranking during the, just to see if anybody's paying attention. USA Prepares, our little broadcast about preparedness, is ahead of 50,000-watt radio stations across the United States. Unbelievable. Including way ahead of C, the letter C, the letter B, the letter S, News Radio, 50,000-watt station. Way ahead of that. Can you imagine? So I often wonder, is anybody paying attention? And the answer is, yeah, they are. They really are. And we're ahead of way ahead of a 50,000-watt station in Detroit. And that station is WJR. Quite fascinating to me that when we started out about 8 years ago at the bottom, literally at the bottom, with 20 people in our class, we are now knocking on the doors of the lamestream media that people think are telling them the truth. Hard to believe. We're ahead of 1010 WINS. We're ahead of WFAN Sports Radio, 660 AM and 101.9 FM, New York City. Ahead of CBS Radio. Ahead of way ahead of WTOP, which is a Washington radio station. Ahead of WNYC. It's unbelievable. Way ahead of BBC Radio. Can you imagine? That, so I guess what you've been telling me off the air, Rich Scheben, is that, yeah, people are paying attention. I guess they are.
BBC just gave me an email over the month I was off and wanted me to interview for some documentary or something. I've had so many of these so-called offers, but I know what they want to do. They want to demonize, discredit, and delegitimize people who think with foresight, who are thinking outside the box, living outside the box. And I told them, I didn't respond to BBC, but everybody, I've had National Geographic, Discovery. I've had dozens, at least, of production companies contact me over the years. And I said, if I don't have final editing rights, I have no desire. My desire is not to be famous or infamous. My desire is to wake the people up so they can control their own destiny. They need to know how we're being distracted, dumbed down, and divided, and they need ideas and solutions on how to combat that. And the only reason your ratings are so far right now, Vince, is I'm going to have to take credit for that because I know your audience is always waiting for me to sing 1970s disco songs. And I keep putting it off. I said I'm going to do it. I keep putting it off, and I never do it. So,
I think that's what it is.
A few more articles, and Vince, we're running out of time. I'm just going to do a handful more. I'm not going to do them all, folks. Again, this is articles that just for the month I was off the air. I just threw a few articles out on my desktop, and just to show the Twilight Zone episode that we are now living in. And as Twilight Zone reality or unreality spikes up, so does our freedoms and liberties spike down. Okay, next article. Over 24,000 pounds of beef recalled, unfit for human consumption. Next article. 10,500 steaks at 2020 Democrat steak fry. No worries about meat consumption and climate impact. So I'm not saying that this 24,000 pounds of meat went to the Democrats to give to the public for their barbecue. These are two separate articles. But you never know these days. But what I am saying is that why not live off-grid? Why not raise your animals? Why not do a little hunting and fishing? Remember the article a few weeks ago that came out? And yes, I do read, even though when I come back from the bush, I probably only read about 2-3 hours a day right now, but I still do some reading. And remember the article where the left was actually pissed off because the study showed that meat consumption does not increase cancer. Well, it does increase cancer if you're using hormone steroids and antibiotics. It does increase cancer if it's GMOs and if it's meat in the laboratory, if it's got red dye in it. All this stuff, we've talked about this in detail. I mean, we have non-meat grown in labs sold in restaurants today. Antibiotics, steroids, hormones, all this stuff, pesticides found in cattle, the cloning livestock. They're modifying proteins, enzymes, amino acids in our food, which affects bioavailability, absorption of nutrients, and metabolism, which affects our overall homeostasis in our body. So they didn't look at that. If they did, then maybe they would have found cancer. But I think they probably took the best cuts of meat for that particular study. And this is one of the reasons why thinking outside the box and relearning old 19th century skills, but dovetailing them with 21st century technology is the way to go. Next article. Zuckerberg admits to Senator, we are clearly biased against conservatives. Duh, do you think so? Can you imagine my shock? Next article. Gangs of illegal aliens brutally murdering LA homeless population. Next article. Dems fundraising in Mexico. Again, folks, these are articles when I was off the air for a month. I just threw a few off to the side. And Vince, we have 15 minutes left, including commercials. I realize I kind of hogged the airwaves a little bit today, but I had to go on this rant because it just shows, especially when you're gone for a few weeks, it just shows where we're going as a country. Has nothing to do with the truth, nothing to do with principle, nothing to do with the rule of law. And this is why I always say stand for principle. The same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. The second is truth, and the third is if somebody has less consequences for their behavior because of what group they come from, then you get to do it too. Okay? And this is, they have literally created victim groups and said that you can't compete, your work is suboptimal, so we're going to lower the bars of standards and expectations for a job. This has been the most destructive social and economic force in American history. This is forced chaos, forced fomentation of hate. This is forced collapse. So, Vince, with our last 15 minutes, I'm going to let you comment on some of these since it is your show. And feel free. I know I mentioned a lot of articles. I got a lot more. I'm not going to do it because we only have basically 15 minutes left with a commercial in between. So at least one commercial. So you tell me which one of those you want to comment on, because I don't even know. You're going to have to go eeny, meeny, miny, mo, because it just shows that we're living in an unrealistic Twilight Zone episode. Vince?
Well, I was thinking about everything that you said, and I put it together into just one comment. You're talking about the dumbing down. You're talking about the reduction of standards. We have been talking about how we're falling down as a country. And just a little bit more proof of that, just a little bit more proof, is that over 8,200 stores are closing this year, 2019, in the United States. Let me just give you just the highlights. Payless, 2,500 stores. Gymboree, 805. Dress Barn, 650. Charlie Roos, 520. Fred's, 520. Family Dollar, 390. Shopko, 371. Charming Charlie, 261. Chico's, 250. Gap, 230. Avenue, 222. Walgreens, 200. Lifeway, 170. Sears. So when Sears closes, it's a big deal, right? 124. Kmart, big store, 115. Performance Bicycle, 102. Destination Maternity, a minimum of 42, up to 67 stores. Pier 1, 57. Party City, 55. Agassi, 54. Victoria's Secret, 53. Office Depot and Office Max, 50. CVS, 46. Children's Place, 45. Abercrombie & Fitch, 40. Bed Bath & Beyond, 40. Christopher Banks, 30 to 40. J.C. Penney, also known as J.C. Penney, 27. Those are big stores, J.C. Penney's. Beauty Brands, 25. Lowe's, 20 stores. Z Gallery, 17. Walmart, 17. Barney's in New York, 15. Macy's, 9. J. Crew, 7. Kohl's, 4. Nordstrom, 3. What we're saying, class, is these are huge numbers of stores closing across the board. Clothing, big box, shoe stores, pharmacy-type stores, drugstores. All kinds of stores are closing. And why is that? Because people are broke. And the stores can't afford their rent. They can't afford their taxes. They can't afford the restrictions. They can't afford all the government help that they get. The rules, the regulations. It's pretty serious. It's really serious. So if you think that we're serious about what we've been saying for 8 years on the air, you ought to do something about it. You ought to prepare and protect your family. And I've said before, I think things are going to get really worse. And we haven't talked about climate, what's happening. We had roughly a 50-degree delta in about a week here at the farm. High of 95, low of 44 this morning. So what's that mean to the plants? What's that mean to the food? What's that mean for your survival? Well, I suggest you look up, look down, look around, see what you see, take it all in, meet with your family, have that little family chat around the kitchen table as we do every day, and if you can at lunch, and if you can at breakfast, and talk about what you all see, and share, and discuss, and then take action. It's one thing to listen, and I'm not too crazy about listeners. I am excited about students and instructors, because those are the people who listen, pay attention, and then act. Listeners just listen. We'll be right back. Rich Evans with us. Rich, so I mentioned some store closings, a little over 8,200 stores closing this year, most of them due to the market changes and bankruptcies. They just can't afford to stay in business. And that tells me that people are broke. That tells me that the supply chain is changing. That tells me that the warehousing at the stores, if you will, the inventory at the stores will not be there as it is now. That tells me that the supply chain is breaking right in front of our eyes, and we're now looking at the Amazon-type purchases more and more. But if the internet goes down, Amazon's done. Amazon's entire model is predicated upon the internet working. So if the power goes down, the grid goes down, the supply chain goes down instantly. What are your thoughts about that? Do you think that's correct?
Well, the internet is made for censorship and surveillance as well as commerce. But keep in mind, internet is only about 11% of purchases. And we talked about this before. When you look at GDP, 70% is consumption here in America. You can't have a reliable measure of GDP, legitimate measure of GDP. And we've talked about this in great detail. GDP, inflation, CPI, all the units of measures and calculations that have changed, but were the same under the Obama administration. And that's one of the reasons why all these numbers can be fudged, if you will, rigged. You cannot have an economy where 80% of people live paycheck to paycheck and say it's flourishing. Now, Donald Trump, not trying to protect him, but legitimately, he inherited a very corrupt, manipulative system. I mean, you have, look at Hunter Biden. I mean, he gets kicked out of the military for drug use, and yet he makes $50,000 per month in Ukraine? Come on. I mean, and I think all this stuff is going to come out. We're at the point where absolutely nothing is real, nothing is legitimate. It's all about nepotism, corruption, manipulation, and keeping the status quo where it is, and maintaining a caste system where they throw you a few nuts and pieces of bread and some tainted wine and say, be satisfied with that, folks. That's where we are. That's exactly what's happening in America. So when you talk about economics in general, I don't think there's any legitimacy in it. Because when you look at valuations, you look at PE ratios, you look at the PMI, the Producers Manufacturers Index, you look at liquidity, solvency, you look at debt, especially corporate debt. I mean, we've talked about this in great detail and specificity, Vince, over the years. There's nothing legitimate about these unit of measures and calculations because they're all being changed to look a lot prettier than they are. And to me, a healthy economy is when people have no or little debt and a healthy savings account. That's what true economy is. But the greatest example is silver, and I talked about this briefly earlier. If anything that's a poor man's asset is going to stay a poor man's asset, because silver should be legitimately 16 to 1 to gold. Well, it's 88 to 1. The powers that be are manipulating everything. That's why I talked about the repo rate and how the banks are going broke. Everything is manipulated and corrupted. There's no legitimacy in supply and demand of free markets anymore. It's gone. And this is one of the reasons we talk about preparedness. This is the reasons why we talk about truth. This is the reasons why we say what we do, because we're at a point in time where the silent majority can no longer hedge their bets. We have laws, we have a Bill of Rights, we have a Constitution, and we need to exercise these laws and rights. And I'll finish, Vince, because we only have seconds left, with a quote from Mark Twain, which I've mentioned before. In the beginning of a change, the patriot is a scarce man, and brave, and hated, and scorned. When his cause succeeds, the timid join him, and then it costs nothing to be a patriot. For those of you who are in the silent majority, and I think it's very few in this audience, we have to speak up. We have to use objective facts. We have to use truth. No one's asking anybody to be a perfect non-sinner, because none of us are. But if someone does it with less consequences for their behavior, then you get to do it too. Remember criteria 3 of standing for principle. And if we all did that, we'd have a much better, safer, and prosperous nation. And Vince, again, thank you for letting me exercise my First Amendment rights.
Oh, delighted to be on the air with you, Rich Scheben. We've done this for years. And I was just thinking, as you were making your final comments, that what America's become, we flip each other's hamburgers, we clean each other's houses, and we make appointments for each other, at the office. That's what we do. Class, I suggest that you consider getting out of the city and move to the countryside. That's what Rich has done, and that's what we've done. I suggest you consider it. Rich, thanks so much for being with us. Class, above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you.